Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of VIP Deep Talk. My name's Jan Milczek. I'm the principal ML engineer at DeepSense AI. With me is Artur Zygadło, our senior tech lead. Hello, Artur.
Hello, excited to be here.
And the VIP for today is none other than Tom Bianculli. Hello, Tom.
Hey, Jan, how are you? Great to be here.
We're so glad that you're with us today. Tom is the Chief Technology Officer at Zebra Technologies. He has more than 25 years of experience in engineering, business, customer research, just take your pick pretty much. He even testified before Congress as part of the Disruptor series. So as you can probably guess, he's a big deal. So we're very, very glad to have you here with us today, Tom, as I already said. But I assume that at least some of our viewers will not know what Zebra is. I assume pretty much all of them used Zebra products at some point, or rather have come in contact with Zebra products, to be more specific, but they might not realize it. So please introduce Zebra to them.
Sure, Jan. Yeah, as we like to say, we're hidden in plain sight. I think in everybody's daily interactions, you've come across Zebra in one form or another. We are the leader in barcode reading technology, using camera systems to be able to do that. So if you've been through a checkout lane in the last several days at a retailer, you've come across our technology most certainly either built into the furniture that's used often, say, at a grocery store, or handheld scanners. But we also make Android-based mobile computers that are used by frontline workers in everything from healthcare to transportation and logistics, out into the retail store floor, and then a lot of asset visibility technology. So many people think of barcode in terms of providing identification information, but we have a whole host of technologies that allow us to not just identify what something is, but understand its condition through environmental sensing, being able to understand its location. So really, what is it, where is it, and how is it? From an asset perspective is a big part of what we sense in enterprise environments. And then really analyzing all of that information. And that's a lot of, I hope we'll have I know we'll have the opportunity to talk about in terms of our partnership with DeepSense, to be able to analyze that data to then mobilize the best actions out to people that need to get the job done, that are serving the front line. Again, whether it's restocking a shelf, delivering a package to your front door, or administering a medication bedside within a hospital. So we're really sensing what's happening in our customers' environments, analyzing that data, and then mobilizing the best next actions for them to take to drive efficiency and better customer experience.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Tom. And now I'll defer to Artur for some introductory AI questions.
Thank you, Jan. So obviously our discussion will be mainly about artificial intelligence. These days, everyone is talking about AI, especially generative AI and its applications. Zebra Technologies, however, is a company that can be seen as one of the early adopters of artificial intelligence, as you've been working on AI-powered solutions for some years already. For instance, in machine vision or demand forecasting solutions, before AI became a truly global trend. Could you tell us a bit about your experiences, about the challenges you faced, and some lessons that you learned on the way to becoming a global AI innovation leader?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Artur. And so it's been great going on that journey together with DeepSense. At Zebra, the way that and the culture we like to use to inspire a lot of our engineering teams and our product management teams and across the board is really to be continuously thinking about the intersection of what's possible from a technology perspective with what's valuable from a market customer use case point of view. And I think that it's okay if one of those gets a little bit ahead of the other, along the way, but we really try to make sure we're looking at how to optimally intersect that through kind of a horizon-based view. And listen, we have examples where we did get too far ahead of ourselves, right? Where we looked at some of the technology and said, hey, we think we can move this forward faster, and then the customers and the use cases will catch up to realizing the value that has. And if I were to talk about, and there's many aspects of this lesson learned, but kind of the crux, if you will, of a lesson learned has really been around change management. And whether it's internal in the organization or it's in the way that technology is going to get deployed into a real world environment, oftentimes we get so focused on making the technology work and functionality that we don't always consider the human side of adopting this new functionality and what needs to change, and how the workflow is going to be done differently. How maybe in many of our environments, like I mentioned, healthcare or in mission critical logistics operations, there might be a operating procedure that's been in place, a standard operating procedure that's been in place for decades, right? And now we're going to introduce a technology that requires that standard operating procedure to go through some maybe pretty massive change. And there's trust involved in making that change, because it's, what a customer has today maybe has worked for them for many decades, but we have the opportunity to bring it to a next level or drive a substantial improvement in consistency or error reduction or performance. And that requires change to that operating procedure, which requires executive buy-in. Like, hey, we're okay with top-down buy-in to making that change. But then it also requires the bottom-up buy-in from the frontline workers, the staff that are going to be impacted in their day-to-day experience, saying, hey, this is going to make my life better. This is going to empower me. This is going to enable me to get more done in a way that creates more job satisfaction. So that's the kind of the crux of the lesson learned. And as a result of learning that lesson, we're bringing a lot more, and this really plays into AI. I know we'll talk about it quite a bit, but it brings in a lot more of the user experience, service design kind of capability, mapping of the workflow way earlier into the process. And so the lesson learned is really thinking about how does the experience, the change management, the way that we're going to navigate all that, and pulling that as far forward in the process as we can as we develop these technologies, and then modulating, the pace and the areas at which we innovate so that we can marry that all up together. So you end up getting this kind of intersection of what's possible, what's valuable, and what change is the industry or the customer set able to absorb in that same time frame. And I think you got to be looking at all three pretty regularly to get it right.
Thanks for sharing these insights about your AI and other emerging technologies adoption journey so far. But maybe let's talk a bit more about it. With so many possible applications of AI and other emerging technologies, I assume that for a company like Zebra, which operates in so many different industries and offers both hardware and software solutions, there are so many directions worth exploring that it must be quite challenging to identify and prioritize the, let's say, strategic initiatives. So can you tell us a bit more about the process of like decision making, which direction to explore, and maybe you can also talk a bit about some most promising technologies that you're currently exploring or investing in.
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to do that. So, when we look at innovation in general, and specifically when we're looking at AI and opportunities there, we've sort of broken down the way we think about that into kind of two categories. One is the evolution of today. So we're fortunate enough to be number one leaders in data capture and barcode reading technology and mobile computing and printing, on-demand thermal printing, as well from a track and trace perspective. And so if we're going to maintain those number one share positions, we have to always be evolving, what we do. So it's how do we take the products we have and enable them to be better through the evolution of various types of technologies, and that includes things that are, maybe not as the leading edge as AI is. So it could be things like battery technology and display technology, and what are we doing with optical systems and cameras and lens systems to be able to get better data, so that we can process that in the back end. And that's a very evolutionary thing, but we stay very much on top of that. And then the second category is revolution, which revolution is sort of saying, how can you deliver the same value that you deliver today, but maybe in an entirely different way? So as an example, if we're capturing barcode data, let's say a picking operation where I have to do many picks per hour, and I might be scanning that barcode with either a handheld scanner or a wearable scanner, and then picking the product. Well, we're starting to think about, with LLMs, generative AI, computer vision, what if I wore a camera maybe on my shoulder or on my lapel, and that camera is actually seeing what I'm seeing. It's able to hear what I'm hearing. It understands the context of the workflow, so it actually can understand the fact that I'm reaching to do a pick, and it automatically captures the barcode, integrates that data with a backend system that synchronizes the fact that that package just got picked, and begins to really automate elements of that workflow completely. So that's revolutionary because it's changing really like with the values not in the scanning, right? In that scenario, the scanning has to work and the barcode capture has to work, of course, but it's much more in understanding what's happening in the environment and using generative AI to then automate what would have been a more manual task. So that's kind of an example from a revolution perspective. And then the second part, I think you had a kind of a second part of where we're seeing the most promising, areas around that. And with Zebra specifically, because we have such a focus on driving productivity at the point of activity, enabling that frontline worker, when we think about where things go over time, the kind of the arc of the future in that regard, with regard to frontline worker, we're really seeing execution systems and planning systems start to merge together. So what do I mean by this? Well, an execution system, let's say in retail or in healthcare, might be a task management system where you're dispatching things that need to be done to those workers throughout the day. It could be picking, it could be restocking, it could be, rounds, administration in like as an example in a healthcare setting. And then there's planning systems that are planning what inventory, should be available at that hospital or that retailer, what labor workforce management plan should be in place to make sure I have enough staff. These are kind of enterprise resource planning tools. And given IoT, given generative AI, and given the need to operate in a much more on-demand way. I mean, we're all experiencing this, right? Like I place an order online and it might get delivered to my door within hours. So the speed at which value is delivered is increasing exponentially. And we've actually, if you'll amuse me here for a second, I just tell one sidebar component to this or story around this is we're doing quite a bit of work with an author, and he's also a venture capital investor by the name of Robert Wolcott, Professor Robert Wolcott. He's at Northwestern University. And he's recently written a book called Proximity, which really goes through this whole concept. But what he's posited is that the biggest impact to businesses going forward is going to be the production and provision of products and services ever closer to the point of demand, right? And that's kind of just a fancy way of saying I can get whatever I want, whenever I want it, delivered however I desire. And it's not just true in a B2C context, which we can all relate to as consumers when we order from Amazon and it gets delivered really quickly, but also in a B2B context where that hospital example, they're ordering supplies in a much more on-demand way rather than in a batch-oriented way. And this just has profound impacts on supply chain, on visibility, like how well can you predict what people are going to order? Well, if they're ordering closer and closer to the time they want it delivered, your ability to predict what should be in stock where goes way down. And so this requires us to use a lot more sensors, if you will, signals from the environment, and allow our customers to better predict what's going to happen. And so the idea of a planning system kind of starts to go away because there's not a lot of value in planning 30 days in advance if I can order something now and have it delivered in 2 hours, right? Because you can't use the fact that the order was placed to sort of predict that that demand is going to be there. So you got to use a lot more signals. You've got to use a lot more digital intelligence, social news, events, weather, and kind of bring that all together to drive better planning and execution. So that's kind of the way we look at it. Is we're going to see that planning and execution systems collapse kind of on top of each other. And we can orchestrate in more of a streaming kind of way, the way work gets done, as opposed to thinking about it in a batch-based way. Hey, you're going to do the following thing for the next 8 hours is probably not going to be the way work gets done. Even now and in the future, it's going to be a much more dynamic environment. And we can use all of this technology to drive empowerment to that worker and drive more job satisfaction. So they can deliver against that reality.
That's fascinating. Thanks for such a detailed response. And you mentioned generative AI as one of your highest priorities right now, and it seems that you've already started implementing some Gen AI solutions, at least for the retail industry. In January, you presented the Frontline Worker Assistant application during the NRF 24 event, which is a big retail event in New York. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular use case, this application? How did you come up with this idea? How did you turn the idea into a working solution? And what's the feedback from your clients so far?
Yeah, awesome, Arthur, and it fits so well together with so many things we just spoke about. If I were to just harken back to what I said around um, intersecting the art of what's possible with what's valuable, what we found in speaking with our customers, and this is not a surprise probably to many of the audience members, is that the population, the dynamics of the population globally really is creating a labor shortage, right? And Korn Ferry actually estimates there'll be a shortage of about 80 million workers globally by the end of the decade, which is more than the population of Germany, as an example, just to put that in context. And that's going to result in several $1 trillion of unrealized economic output. So our customers are experiencing kind of really unprecedented attrition, which is sort of cycling out of workers, but also a shortage in being able to get the workers that they need. So knowing that as a backdrop, and also this idea that when someone does start a position in one of these frontline operations, being able to reduce the time for them to become competent, like how quickly can you make that worker as good as your best worker, and empower them to be able to do that, is a real pocket of value in the market. That's, our customers are really looking for that. And generative AI, of course, affords us the opportunity to ingest massive amounts of data and then turn that into intelligence, essentially. So what we did together with DeepSense, as you pointed out at NRF and at even our own internal sales conference, is we worked really closely with a European customer. We ingested probably about 150 standard operating procedure documents. And again, this was using our organic AI team within Zebra, partnered up with the expertise at DeepSense to deliver this capability. And we used retrieval augmented generation, a RAG kind of approach, to augment an open source LLM model, and then bring that down to our mobile computing devices, so those frontline workers can ask questions about policies, procedures, and have that information right there at their fingertips, almost like they have a mentor on their shoulder with them through their entire shift that can guide them to become more capable, even though they maybe haven't worked so long in that particular position. So being able to ask questions, like in a retail environment, maybe a customer is making a return and they have the receipt, but they don't have the credit card that they bought that item with. Well, what do? Do you offer a store credit? Can you give them cash back? There's obviously a policy behind that, and you can ask that sort of question right there on the fly, and then be able to deliver that value. And that was received really well by many of our customers. And I can say our journey continues with DeepSense, and pretty excited, although I can't say too much about it, what we're going to be able to do at NRF again this coming January, where we will have quite a large retailer brand name in our NRF booth with us, talking about even next generation versions of what I just described.
Right. So it seems that Gen AI will make the frontline workers' jobs and lives much easier and more efficient. I would be more than happy to discuss more Gen AI use cases at Zebra, but unfortunately now I need to pass the mic back to Jan.
Thank you so much, Arthur. You mentioned a lot of AI-oriented initiatives, and one thing I would like to pick your brain about is the strategy behind it. Because if you pick where to apply AI by seeing processes and realizing, oh, we can improve that with AI, well, you need someone on the inside, of course, who's familiar both with the process and with AI. If you go for where can we apply AI, where can we apply this new technology, there's this saying that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So this is pretty much danger from both sides. So how do you make sure that you do not overdo with AI, but at the same time you identify where it can bring tangible improvement into your products?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's obviously one that there's no magic answer to it, but I would say the approach that we take in, this connects back with some points I was making earlier, but is really embedding with our customers. So I maybe should have said in the introduction, at Zebra, we're super fortunate to do business with more than 85% of the Fortune 500 companies. And in almost every one of those instances, at least, we have a direct relationship with that customer. So we obviously can't cover every customer across the whole globe. So we have a tremendously big partner network. And north of 80% of our revenue flows through that partner network. But 15, 20% is going that we're selling direct into those customers. So we can meet with and do meet with the biggest, let's say, public transportation carriers in the world, the biggest retailers in the world, some of the biggest healthcare system operators in the world. And we understand by working with them really the workflow, Jan, of what's happening in that environment. So in that portion of the research, we actually completely forget about the technology. And we have user experience, service design, ethnographers, time and motion study team members, individuals that focus on things like ergonomics. If I'm picking, hundreds of items an hour, and I'm doing that for 4 hours, what does that mean from a fatigue perspective? And even down to the level of we will put sensors on workers to understand which muscles they're using and how much they're fatiguing certain muscles and movements as we study that workflow. So that's kind of the level we're getting down to. It's like how much time is being spent, how much muscle movement is being used, how fatiguing is that muscle movement, and to kind of study that workflow from end to end. And then once we do that, we actually look then at where can we apply technology to enable that workflow to become ultimately more efficient. And that might mean that there's a physical innovation in the sense that we mount, let's say, a wearable product on someone's finger or the back of their hand. We recently launched a mobile computer that has a screen that's only 2 inches big that fits right on the back of your hand and can project scanning out. So you can keep your hands free to pick and move things, but just by kind of gesturing like this, I can read the barcode. So as we kind of unpack that workflow, we look for areas that we can basically automate and remove friction in subtasks within a workflow. And I think this is really important and profound because there's so many headlines out there and there's so many companies that are just trying to completely automate workflows. And our belief at Zebra is really in design-led thinking. It's in human-centered thinking. It's where empathy for the worker intersects the objective you're trying to achieve in your business. And what that means is that we can actually remove steps in that workflow process and create innovation in a much more rapid fashion than if we were to try to say, oh, let's completely automate the workflow, because there's just too many things that require human interaction, human intervention, movement, skills, fine motor movement, and so on, that we're way better off saying, how do we make that person's life better? That's trying to get that job done. And the best way we could do that is to remove elements that don't really add value. Are they dull? Are they dangerous? Are they dirty? Are they repetitive? And really focusing on where we can insert the technology to do that. So I'll just wrap up that question by saying we're doing it, continue to do that. And generative AI is now a whole other frontier by which we can automate select sections of that workflow. So whether it's the example I was giving earlier, where I may not know something and I would have had to go back and leave the side of the customer, I can do that right by the side of the customer and ask the question and get the answer. Or maybe I don't need to read the barcode anymore because the camera's going to understand and do that automatically. So I just removed that step in the workflow, which saves our customers, time and money, and it's also, much more consistent. Or it's maybe even, in which we're starting to look at now, is like AIs talking to other AIs that are then talking with a person. So as an example, we may discover that, let's say a bottle of water these bottles of water, say, sold at a retailer, And let's say there's 500 stores in a chain of retailers that are selling that water. Well, we can look at the signal data through the point of sale system, and we have a solution that does this, Zebra Prescriptive Analytics. And we can say, hey, we see, let's say, I don't know, 50 bottles of water per 3 hours being sold at store X, but we only see 1 bottle of water being sold per hour at store Y. And so that store Y is an anomaly amongst the 500 stores, let's say. And so, well, what's happening at that store? Well, probably the water's not located in the right place, or it's not being, the promotion is not being put on that water. So an AI can detect that anomaly, first of all. And when it detects that anomaly, it can communicate with another AI that's looking at overall store operations. That second AI can then send through generative AI a message to me as the operator, as a worker in that store, and say, hey, can you go to aisle 2 and take a picture of where the water is? And I take that picture, and it will look at the labeling on the shelf, the price, the promotion, how much are there stockouts, and then it can generate a whole set of follow-on tasks to go and address the problem. So, in this case, we're actually eliminating workflow steps, but also catching a problem that may have not have been discovered for days, or at least at the very least, many hours. And that's real. I mean, that impacts, more bottles of water sold at that location directly impacts the revenue and the customer experience for that retailer. So, there's lots there. All starts with the customer, starts with the use case, unpacking it, and ultimately, how can we apply the technology after we understand that to make people's lives better?
One thing that piqued my interest again was the part about measuring even muscle activity in
Yes.
frontline workers to create your products. At the same time, we mentioned before that you even testified before Congress, and you testified mainly on wearables and wearable technology. So I wanted to ask you, give me a 1-minute pitch of what frontline worker, what the job will look like with all the wearables. I assume not with the muscle sensors on everyday life, but maybe. So what's it gonna look like in a few years when Zebra gets its way?
Yeah, sure. So we're really excited about this. We pioneered the wearable category, over 20 years ago. So companies like UPS and FedEx have used our wearables in their operations going, way back. And the main reason for that was, like I said, to be able to keep your hands free while you're still able to do some of this data capture. And, if you think about loading a truck or unloading a truck or moving, parcels in and off conveyance and that sort of thing. And that served us really well. We've obviously evolved the product line, smaller, lighter, more capable, all the way to the point where we have a fully functional Android computer on the back of the hand that allows us to do that. And I think where we're going first, I haven't quite figured out the term, but the analogy I've used is, if you think about mobile first, I mean, mobile first is an old concept now, right? But the idea was, how do I design applications and the experience in a mobile first way, right? Because when you're in front of your computer on a laptop, the way that application is designed from an experience perspective assumes a mouse, a keyboard, a large screen. And we all know when the first mobile computers came out, I'm dating myself here, but Windows CE or Windows Mobile, you might recall that it was kind of the desktop just lifted and shifted onto a device, and it wasn't a particularly good experience, right? You had a stylus and a start button at the bottom, and you had to select off these really small font menus and everything. And then the concept of mobile first came out, and what did we start to see? Well, swipe and pinch and zoom and all these kinds of interaction modalities from a user experience perspective when you start to design an application with mobile first in mind. So that's water under the bridge. Everybody's doing that today. And I think with LLMs and generative AI, we're going to start to think about, what is a LLM first experience, right? What does generative AI first look like? And we're pretty convinced that that's not going to transform just the interaction experience, but it's actually going to transform the physicality of the product itself. And that's where wearables now become not just a user a physical benefit in terms of the fact that it's wearable instead of being held in my hand, but it also has a fundamental workflow benefit. So the device and the application start to kind of melt into the background. The job to be done really comes to the foreground, and the wearable is now used to understand what's happening in the environment, and automatically um, collect information that would otherwise have to be manually collected, nudge a worker. If maybe I'm about to pick the wrong thing, it can let me know and kind of nudge me in a certain direction. And it can ultimately orchestrate a collection of workers so that network of people can be as efficient and capable and consistent as possible.
Thank you. But should it, in this case, should it be LLM first or wearable first, or which one if you had to pick one?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think let me put it this way: what if we focus exclusively on experience? I think we always end up doing the right thing, right? And so if 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 the next generation of what's possible from an experience perspective becomes that there's not a user interface but a real world interface. This is right. So I'm not picking things from menus or swiping or pitching and zooming. I'm actually just interacting with the physical world. And as I do that through spatial computing, as an example, spatial computing combined with generative AI, as I'm actually doing that interfacing with the real world, all this information is modeled, captured through an LLM, and then able to kind of orchestrate the workflow better. So I think it's experience first, probably. But as we think about the experience that's enabled through LLMs in generative AI that can literally understand and model the physical world, we can completely overhaul what that experience feels like through wearables and through new interaction models.
Thank you so much, Tom. And Artur, I believe you have a question about collaborations, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks again, Jan. We've already discussed the Frontline Worker Assistant project before as a key Gen AI application developed by Zebra. And apart from the NRF retail show, you also presented the solution during the Google Cloud Next event in April, which unveiled your Gen AI partnership with Google. You're also partners with Qualcomm, who you collaborate with on the topic of Gen AI deployment and inference on edge devices like Zebra's mobile computers or tablets. So the question is, what role do you think such collaborations and partnerships with Google, Qualcomm, and other institutions play in making real-world applications of AI possible?
Yeah, and Arthur, you shouldn't leave yourselves out of the equation. So DeepSense is absolutely a partner of ours as well on this journey. And what it brings is, and it's very much true of the DeepSense relationship as well, is the rate at which we're seeing change happen. Like we can all attest to this, right? There's some quotes out there around the rate of change in the technology space. It'll never be as slow as it is right now, right? So we're gonna see that rate of change just get, even though it feels fast, it's going to continue to get faster and faster. And so I really believe that competitive differentiation nowadays, modern competitive differentiation, isn't about hunkering down and not sharing what you have in order to create differentiation. That used to be actually a strategy, right? Like, hey, don't share what we're doing, build more and more capability out in a domain and try to create competitive distance that way. That's still a thing. It doesn't completely go away. We file lots of intellectual property and we continue to do that. But I think competitive differentiation in terms of understanding how you can move as fast as possible is also really important. All right. How can we deliver on our mission as a company while getting to that mission ahead of everybody else? And you can't do that without partners in today's dynamic and the rate at which things are changing. So, Google on the hyperscaler side of things has been an important partner of ours from Google Cloud Platform, but also Android, because we deploy Android in all our mobile computers. And then Qualcomm are the chips that we use in all of our devices. So, that's probably been known, but it's not something that, has been talked about as much as it is recently. And the reason for that is, again, with the customer-centric focus we have, as we look to optimize for our customers, many of the IT teams we work with at the kinds of retailers and healthcare companies we work with are talking about, how do I get more and more workload at the edge? How can I get the workload, the generative AI workflows, close to where the data is being collected as possible? Because it's costly to store, transport, round trip, response times, and so on. And so there's really some great things, as you all know, that many of these chipset providers are doing that allow us to run, GPU, NPU, neural processing units, more and more tops of performance down on the device. And that allows us to kind of optimize the whole equation. So we're working really closely with Qualcomm to look at how do we quantize open source models against select use cases and really optimize their functionality on the devices we make that use those Qualcomm processors. We know the whole thing won't be able to just be done on the edge. So how do we then connect that with, with Google and their hyperscaler cloud platform to enable the end-to-end solutions that we're going after? And then how do we accelerate, magnify, and scale our ability to execute on that with, folks like yourselves with DeepSense to be able to do that? And that's kind of the model we're employing, and, it's paying dividends.
Thanks. I must say, I couldn't agree more. I also believe that close collaboration is essential to success. And I think it's time to go back to Jan for his last, but definitely not least question.
Thank you so much, Arthur. But my question will be a little bit of a curveball. So, Tom, is there anything that you perhaps meant to say but we didn't ask, or just anything you would like to tell our viewers? The floor is yours now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit of a curveball because we didn't talk about that one. But, what I would say is, it goes back to one element I said before and one kind of new piece. One is this constantly looking at the intersection of what's possible, what's valuable, and really being open to what's possible. I find that a lot of times that gets closed down way too soon, right? Where the assumption is, well, you can't do that. And, there's lots of people that have spoken about this, but I think maybe SpaceX might be the best example with Elon Musk, where, he's very much talked about first principles thinking. And I think that's really important, is to really get down to, what's the underlying reason why something can't be done. And when you get down to first principles, meaning basically like physics, we can't change the laws of physics, but until you sort of ground out on, why can't something be done down to that level, you have to always be peeling back and understanding why, because there may be an entirely new way of doing something that, nobody thought of. And, the example there with SpaceX is obviously the reusable, a booster rocket, and the fact that, that's able to go up into space and then come back down and land itself on a platform and fundamentally change the economics of being able to do rocket launches by an order or, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude. And at the beginning of that journey, everybody, including the most intelligent people in rocket science, said it was not possible, right? But, they were thinking with legacy thinking and not thinking with first principles thinking. And then the second thing I would say is just, be curious. And it kind of goes hand in hand with first principles thinking, but, just always kind of asking, well, why this and why that and why do you need that? And just really kind of digging down and being curious. And there's 2 parts to that. One is, we collectively learn as an organization a massive amount of information, and because we're curious, and be curious is one of our tenets around the hallways of the company from a cultural perspective. But the other thing too is it's a very respected interaction from a person-to-person perspective. And so when we're dealing with customers and we're truly curious about their operations, we're not just trying to sell them the next thing, that puts us in a very strategic position with them, and it forms a relationship that is maybe surprising, maybe not, just a lot of other people don't have, because they don't exhibit that same level of curiosity about how we can really help them, truly help them, be better in their operations. And that's been, widely successful for us. And I can't emphasize it enough, because as obvious as it is, you don't see it as often as you would like. So those are the few, I guess, parting comments I'd leave.
Thank you so much for those insights and, guidelines as well. Thank you so much. This was Tom Bianculli of Zebra Technologies. Again, thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Arthur. And, thanks to the entire DeepSense team. We really value the relationship and, glad we have the opportunity to work so closely together. Take care.
We had a blast, both with the collaboration and with this interview as well, if I can say so myself. To our viewers, I am Jan Kantymilczek of DeepSense AI. With me was Artur Zygadło.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And this was a Deep Talk VIP. Please check out our other Deep Talks with C-level executives, among others at Hexagon, Michelin, or Brainly. And to our audience, thank you for watching and see you next time.